Oh, hello there. I'm Professor Pipes, and today I'm reading William Shakespeare's Romeo and Juliet. Since you're here, I might as well tell you all about it, or at least all about Act 1, since it's a long play, and I haven't got all day. Romeo and Juliet is often called the greatest love story of all time by a lot of ill-informed teenagers who either never read it or weren't paying much attention. They might be the same kids who think that the Joker and Harley Quinn have a really loving, healthy relationship. However, while their love story isn't quite a happily ever after, it is famous for its clever wordplay, depiction of teenage life, and timeless themes of love, hatred, betrayal, jealousy, and fate, to name a few. To start out, I'll tell you who's who in the show. Leads and featured players only, of course. There's Lord Montague and Lord Capulet, Romeo and Juliet's dads. They hate each other. The end. Romeo Montague is a cliché emo teen who is obsessed with a girl named Rosaline. That's right, there was someone before Juliet. And ladies, he's the guy your dad warned you about. Only after one thing. Juliet Capulet is a cliché 13-year-old girl who wants to make her parents happy. Aww. I'd imagine her room is filled with flowers and hearts and unicorn statues. She basic. Benvolio Montague is Romeo's cousin and the nicest guy you'll ever meet. Benevolent, beneficial, Benvolio. Tybalt's Capulet is Juliet's cousin and the total opposite of Benvolio. The only thing he loves more than fighting is... Nope, there's nothing he loves more than fighting. Prince Aeschylus is the leader of the town Verona, and he hates the stupid feud between the Montagues and Capulets. Mercutio is Romeo's best friend, and his total opposite. He's a leader who loves partying and being the center of attention. He's like a mix between the captain of the football team, the head of the debate team, and a frat bro. Also, he's the prince's cousin. The nurse is Juliet's servant, who happens to also be her best friend. It's kind of sad. She loves talking about how she nursed Juliet as a child and generally just being super inappropriate. She's like that, great aunt who likes to pinch your cheeks and always tells embarrassing stories about when you used to run around naked in her backyard when you were 2. Count Paris is also related to the prince and in love with Juliet. This can't end well. And that's about it. There's some servants and cops and even some musicians later on, but frankly, who cares about the peasants? Certainly not the rich folks who were paying Shakespeare to write. Now, let's move on to some summarizing. Now, this doesn't replace actually reading the story or watching a play, but it should help you to better understand the important plot points in each scene. In Scene 1, we're introduced to several of the major players as the two families start fighting. Prince Aeschylus breaks up the fight and then threatens Montague and Capulet with death if there is more fighting in town. Ruh-roh. Then everybody leaves except Lord and Lady Montague and Benvolio. And they talk about how it seems like something's wrong with Romeo because he's acting all emo. As Romeo enters, his parents leave Benvolio to get the truth out of their son. Romeo is honestly a bit of a drama queen and whines about how terrible everything is. Benvolio eventually gets Romeo to admit that he's in love with someone who doesn't love him back. As it turns out, though, he's really just in lust with her and is acting all emo because she won't sleep with him. He literally refers to himself as Saint Seducing Gold and is surprised that she just won't ope her lap to him. Clearly, she knows exactly what he wants and she ain't having any of it. In Scene 2, we briefly switch over to Paris. No, the person, not the city. I mean, seriously, Cooper, it's like you didn't even read the story. Thank you. Anyway, Paris is asking Lord Capulet if he can marry Juliet. Capulet thinks she might be a little young. Hello, she is only 13! I bet she's barely over her My Little Pony obsession. But he eventually says that he's cool with it if she's cool with it, which, to be honest, is pretty progressive. And he encourages Paris to try to woo her at a party he's throwing tonight. He hands the invite list to his servant, and then he and Paris head out. Problem is, the servant can't read. Luckily, he bumps into Romeo and Benvolio, who, surprise, surprise, are still discussing Romeo's love life. After talking about how miserable he is, Romeo eventually reads the list for the poor servant. Fun fact, the list includes both Mercutio, Romeo's best friend, and Rosaline, the chick Romeo is into. For now, at least. Benvolio tells him they should crash the party, because he wants Romeo to check out other hot babes. Romeo agrees, but just so he can creepily stare at Rosaline all night. In scene 3, we head into Juliet's room, where her mom and the nurse tell her about Paris. The nurse makes a bunch of dirty jokes about Juliet and Paris. Everyone rolls their eyes, and Juliet says, "I'll look to like if looking liking move, but no more deep will I endart mine eye than your consent gives strength to make it fly." That's Shakespeare speak for, "Yes, mother, I'm a robot child who does whatever you say, and will like whoever you tell me to like." Like that's gonna last. In scene 4, Romeo and his buddies are about to head into the party, but Romeo's being a big old bummer and says he had a bad dream about the party. Mercutio then gives one of Shakespeare's most famous comedic monologues, saying that Queen Mab, the giver of dreams, just likes to mess with people, and that those who believe in dreams, like Romeo, are gullible idiots. Romeo finally agrees to go in, but he mentions that his dream told him that something that will happen at the party tonight will set into motion a chain of events that will lead to his untimely death. Bum, bum, bum! Moving on. Scene 5 is the party! Woo! What? Again with this stuff? Cooper, I obviously meant the Capulet masquerade party. Take that down. Now! Tybalt sees Romeo almost immediately and gets all mad. Grrr. Capulet tells him to cool it because this is a party, which makes Tybalt even angrier, and he secretly vows to get revenge. Meanwhile, Romeo and Juliet see each other from across the room and fall in love at first sight. Time stops. Little hearts float above their heads. Aww. Okay, fine, I may have added in the little hearts, but still. They share some actually pretty clever banter, and eventually kiss, right as the party ends, and they get separated. Both then find out who the other one is, leaving the audience with a bit of a cliffhanger at the end of this act. What will happen next? Will they run away together? Will Juliet decide to marry Paris? Will Tybalt ever get anger management? You'll just have to read on to find out. Okay. So there are some pretty important themes going on in this act. The first and most obvious is love. There's lots of it going on in all sorts of forms. We see the familial love of Romeo's parents for their son, as all they want to do is find out what's wrong so they can help him. The next kind of love we see is actually lust, or as the Greeks called it, eros, which is where the term erotic comes from. Shakespeare wrote Romeo as a cliché, horny teenage boy, probably so we could see him change as the love he experiences changes. Philia, or brotherly love, is seen between Romeo and his friends. Yes, they make fun of him, but ultimately they just want him to get over Rosaline so he can be happier. Finally, we see some puppy love, or as the Greeks called it, ludus. Is that how it's pronounced? Ludus? Ludus? I don't know. I don't speak ancient Greek. Anyway, this is that flirty banter between Romeo and Juliet. Maybe you don't believe in love at first sight, but flirtation? It's undeniable. The next theme we've got to hit on is time, or age. Shakespeare has us questioning the importance and relevance of age. First, he introduces Lords Montague and Capulet, whose wives both tell them that they're too old to be fighting, suggesting that hatred, anger, and fighting are really only acceptable in the young. Then Capulet and Paris talk about how young is too young to get married, with Paris saying that many people Juliet's age are already wives and even mothers. Ew. And Capulet punning on the statement by saying that they are marred if married too young. The nurse and Lady Capulet also talk about how young Juliet is. Her youth and immaturity are reinforced when she mentions that she hasn't even thought about marriage yet. It is an honor that I dream not of. However, Lady Capulet reveals that she was a mother at Juliet's age, making her about 25 or so now if you're keeping score. During the party, Capulet and a friend go on and on about the good old days when they used to dance and flirt with girls, which was apparently about 30 years ago. Wait, that would mean that he stopped being young enough to flirt before his wife was even born? That can't be right. Nope, yeah, that's right. Gross. Next, we should probably talk about destiny and fate. The prologue calls Romeo and Juliet star-crossed lovers, suggesting their sad love story was determined by fate. Romeo himself clearly believes in fate, which is shown when he talks about his dream. However, Mercutio mocks him for this belief and discusses how people just dream about things that are important to them. And since Romeo is an emo wet blanket, it makes sense that he would dream about anything to get him out of going to a party. But then the fact that Romeo's dream really is prophetic would seem to suggest that maybe fate does play a role. I guess we'll have to wait on this one. Opposition is also very important in this play, and it's introduced in the prologue and the very first scene. The Capulets and Montagues immediately start fighting, and only stop when threatened with death. We also see opposition in the form of character foils. Foils are characters that have totally opposite characteristics, meant to reinforce the qualities of each. The important foils in this play are Benvolio, who literally tries to keep the peace, and Tybalt, who says he hates peace, and he loves fighting. Also of note are Romeo, who just wants to sit in the dark and who blames everything bad on fate. And his best friend Mercutio, who is the absolute life of the party and thinks that we control our own destinies. We also see opposition in Shakespeare's wordplay, such as when Romeo uses oxymorons, or contradictory figures of speech, to describe his feelings for Rosaline and his family's love of fighting. O brawling love, O loving hate, O anything of nothing. His feelings are complex and contradictory, suggesting the confusing nature of love and hatred. Lastly, let's talk about the motif of light and dark. This motif specifically helps to reinforce the theme of love in this act. At the start of the play, Romeo's parents mention how he keeps going out all night and creates an artificial night in his room when he comes home. By the end of the act, however, he mentions that Juliet teaches the torches to burn bright, suggesting a newfound love for light as soon as he sees his new love. Interestingly, Romeo and Juliet first meet at night, so their love is symbolically a light in the darkness. Finally, I'd like to leave you with some food for thought. These are questions you might want to consider as you continue reading Romeo and Juliet. First, do Romeo and Juliet control their own destinies, or are they really star-crossed, doomed by fate? Second, in what ways are Romeo and Juliet realistic, and in what ways are they exaggerations? Have you ever met people kind of like them? Third, how is Romeo and Juliet a coming-of-age story? Fourth, what are the Elizabethan expectations of men and women? In other words, how are the different genders described and portrayed in this play? Finally, Romeo and Juliet is a play meant to be watched. What are the benefits of watching it rather than reading it? And are there any benefits to reading it rather than watching it? Thanks for watching this overview of Act 1 of Romeo and Juliet. I'm Professor Pipes, and as Shakespeare once wrote, peace!